going to invite Martine and Cheryl to also comment on whether expropriation is a boogeyman or a boon, and for whom it might be one or the other. And I want to also invite you to comment on this question. Given that poor and racialized people and people with disabilities are disproportionately likely to be living in unsafe and poorly maintained housing, what kinds of protections, perhaps additional protections beyond expropriation, might be put in place that does not cause harms? I'll pass it over to Martine if you have any comments on expropriation and its ability to do things, and other options available as well. Martine?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll speak to this idea of whether expropriation is a boogeyman or a boon. I think it's just really a fascinating tool, and it has this great potential to be used to promote progressive social goals like we're discussing today. But historically, it hasn't always been this way with expropriation. It's not that common for governments to use this strong power to take from the rich and give to the poor. Across the globe, we've seen that land grabs and expropriation are typically used to privatize commonly held lands and to enrich private interests and elites. The scale of this is actually quite staggering. Getting more specific, right here in Canada, we had this major experiment with a program some of you may be familiar with called urban renewal in the 1960s and 70s, where there was massive expropriation in this country. So across 85 sites in Canada, nearly 20,000 households were displaced via expropriation for this program. And this is where the city was taking away private property, cities, I should say, in order to promote revitalization. So I think this is an interesting example because it wasn't that long ago, and also because the goal is potentially quite socially oriented. It's this broad sweeping goal to improve cities in the public interest. Now, in practice, this is not what urban renewal was about. The program operated in such a way that it was meant to enrich the business interests, and entire communities were designated as slums to justify their demolition. People also ended up not liking this program. We had a Royal Commission on Civil Rights in Ontario that found that the program was generating disproportionate hardship for low-income people, and it was destroying a lot of well-functioning communities. But to me, the fascinating precedent here is that we had this massive program which expropriated private property in the name of a potentially progressive seeming social goal. And then for a while, we had this widespread social acceptance of this practice. So it seems to me that this example shows the potential for a new era in which expropriation is used for actually progressive social goals, ones that I think on this panel we've been discussing there's a fair amount of widespread agreement about: the need for housing, the idea that housing is a human right. I think it's time for cities to be aggressive here in pursuing these goals and giving us a new era in which expropriation is used to do the right thing. Now, I'll just speak really briefly to your question about whether or not, what we can do to protect people that might be harmed by this. So I think the message from my story I just told is that there's a threat that comes with expropriation. It has been used badly in the past. And so I think we really need to have ironclad commitments with any of these types of policies, that you have a strong right to return, that there's a right for safe and adequate, affordable relocation for anybody who's relocated from these expropriations. You need fair compensation, and you need to ensure that rents are affordable and don't increase as a result of these policies. So we don't want expropriation to end up being used as a tool to promote gentrification or to, be a backdoor to social cleansing of low-income districts. We've seen that approach before, and that's not what we would want with a new version of expropriation.
Great, thank you, Martine. I would recommend to folks to look up Jane Jacobs and the work that she did in New York fighting one of the commissioners there, Moses. Great stories that are in line with what you were just speaking about, Martine. Cheryl, over to you.
Fine. All right. So I would definitely say that expropriation would be a boon. It would be a benefit. Kristen outlined a great example as to why it's a boon. It makes an otherwise seller who otherwise may not have sold their property an owner who would be more likely to sell their property, and to actually an owner who sells their property to later be used by the city for affordable housing. I think it's also important to note that expropriation is used in other circumstances other than housing. The provincial government actually recently has been pushing for expropriation to be made easier for building transit. And the thing about transit is that transit, unfortunately, when you look at major large scale transit investments like LRTs or subways, are often actually a tool for driving profits for the private sector, right? Like when you see a new LRT being planned, you'll see the property values shoot up immediately, and you'll see a bunch of development applications going through to build huge 40, 50, 60 story towers. So expropriation is being used to derive profit for the private sector. I think that also we can consider how expropriation can be used for profit for the public sector. If you consider that providing affordable housing actually reduces public health costs, you can look at it down the line as actually it's a net benefit to expropriate property for the construction of affordable housing. And of course, on that property, perhaps you can even increase the density to a modest level so that you can actually pay for some of the costs involved in whether it be legal or otherwise in, I guess, repurposing that property from privately underused housing to publicly affordable housing.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Cheryl.